Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Peter Fishman with us today, co-founder and CEO at Mozart Data. The company is about data and infrastructure. He's a data analyst and statistician that helps business harness the power of the modern data stack, which we're going to talk about today. This podcast is presented to you by podpire.com. If you want to generate more than 50 leads per month, go to podpire.com. We leverage cold email and podcast to fill up your pipeline with leads. Peter, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I do go by Fish. I'm, as you mentioned, the co-founder and CEO of Mozart Data. What I've been up to today, and for the most part for the last 5 years, has been building Mozart Data, which is, as you mentioned, a data infrastructure company. We help SMBs get started and harness the value of the modern data stack. My personal history had been working as sort of a data analyst, data scientist after sort of a failed academic career. And what I had seen at a lot of mid-stage and late-stage startups is that these companies got a lot of value out of bringing together multiple data sources and asking good questions of it. And I wanted to make that same type of capability available to earlier and earlier stage companies. And we thought the solution to that would look something like Mozart does today.
You've worked at very successful companies, a lot of which I identify as Silicon Valley scale-ups. So Zenefits, Open Door, also worked at Microsoft, Yammer. What did you learn from your time at these companies, and how did that motivated you to start Mozart?
Yeah. So the first thing is it's an incredible experience when you get to be on any of these roller coasters. So many of these companies 10x in revenue and in people while I was there. So I was typically joining around employee number 100 and saw incredible scaling up of these businesses. So you learn a number of things. You learn about how you sort of hold the reins when you have product market fit and your company is just sort of wildly growing. You learn what are the typical ways that companies can scale up, what are the channels which they've successfully scaled up. So in many ways, it was really fortunate to see these businesses as they were hitting their inflection points. The truth is that even these companies that we sort of in hindsight and at the time view as wildly successful had a lot of underlying issues. They had a lot of challenges. They had a lot of distribution challenges. And we were all leveraging data and experiments to figure out, okay, which of these things were working at the companies. And as I sort of mentioned, what motivated me was a decade ago or 15 years ago, you would need to hire a team of data engineers to start to really derive these insights. But in practice today, you just need, somebody with sort of my data analytics skills that could ask the right questions of the data and then figure out sort of its applications. So we want the challenges to be not the rote things like moving data. We want the challenges to be who asks the best questions of the data, who understands their business and the way that data applies to their business. And that's kind of how we want SMBs to be able to compete.
Tell me a bit more about who you target precisely and what media channel do you use to get in contact with them?
Sure. So it's a pretty horizontal play. So at the end of the day, most companies, we feel, get the most value out of asking ad hoc questions of their data. So a lot of times in data, you see individual sort of best pieces. So maybe that's a data warehouse solution, or maybe that's an ETL solution, or maybe that's a transformation solution. Or you see highly verticalized and specialized solutions. We build the modern data stack just for a DTC player. In practice, we find that both of these approaches have shortcomings. So Mozart is a very verticalized solution. So, sorry, a horizontal solution. So Mozart is all about building the entirety of the modern data stack. So not that you have to go to a half dozen vendors to put all these pieces together. You get it out of the box in minutes, world-class, competitive priced with Mozart. So that was kind of the innovation that we really wanted to bring. At the end of the day, how do you go selling a horizontal SaaS solution? it's actually quite challenging because sometimes those solutions are very targeted at a specific job title. Somebody that's maybe like, when I worked at Zenefits, a head of HR. When I worked at Yammer, maybe like a head of IT. But in our situation, it's actually quite challenging. In SMB, there very rarely is a head of data. Typically, it's somebody that's saddled with building out the data function and capability, somebody that's like a CTO, somebody that's like a head of RevOps, somebody that's sort of filling a specific function. So we deal with a lot of founders and a lot of sort of early technical folks, but also a lot of early business folks, biz ops, rev ops, marketing ops. So that's a challenge. And because the titles vary, you can't do your typical sort of targeting. You can't just say, I'm going to take out a LinkedIn ad. I'm going to go for everybody who's the head of data of a company size 20 to 200. You can't really do that. So, a big part of our distro strategy has been obviously content. So, pods like this, but also a big part of our distro strategy has been working with partners. So a lot of people get the value downstream. So they use BI tools, they use data activation or reverse ETL tools, and they want to get a lot of value out of their data. And we help basically provide that all the parts that are necessary before those tools, which might first come to mind. So we work very closely with partners in the ecosystem.
So first, they need to understand the power of leveraging data and monetizing it, I guess, is the first criteria, which not a lot of CEOs and founders are leveraging. What would you say, 5 to 10% leverage that nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, to be totally frank, that's 5 to 10% of the best companies. It's actually a much smaller fraction than that. So a big part of what we do, obviously, is educational, not just about Mozart data, but about sort of the value of data in and of itself. Our best customers do tend to be coming from sort of more mature companies that have had great data stacks in the past, and they say, hey, we want those same capabilities that we had at company X. And they're sort of annoying about it almost to an extent. And that's where we come in and provide an incredible solution that you don't need the data engineering team that you had at company X just to do kind of to get essentially the value of the modern data stack.
Right. And then once they have this pain of having a bunch of data that's unclean, your tool helps them clean it out automatically. Do you leverage AI, and how do you distinguish yourself from the competition?
So clean data for all practitioners, they realize that so much of their job is just cleaning, sorting, organizing, joining data sets together. So most people think of data analysis and they think of literally a piece of analysis. Maybe it's a dashboard or a time series. They're thinking about kind of the actual analysis. The practitioners are thinking about the data pipelines. They're thinking about, okay, what's messy about my data? What outlier of my data throws off any answer? What broken pipeline or data source that didn't refresh gives me an out of whack answer? And this is how real practitioners think about using data. So it is certainly the case that we take a lot of pride in the fact that we think our tool massively helps diagnose pipeline issues, stay on top of pipeline issues, throw alerts about pipeline issues, because at the end of the day, that's where you're spending a lot of your time. In practice, of course, there's a lot of value to be had downstream and democratizing data. Now, what has been the role of AI in the past, 2.5 years? Obviously, the chart of AI consumption sort of in the world just sort of looks like this, not just like hockey stick, just looks like a staircase. It's just like, it's just wildly crazy up and to the right. One of the things that happened in the data space, as soon as AI became really just sort of jaw-dropping, is that people rushed into the challenge of going English to SQL. So typically, or natural language of some sort to SQL. And typically there is this wall that happens, which is you've got your sort of technical users that are very familiar with using SQL, that can that can basically write queries and they can access the data and make insights about the data. And you have all sort of the business users that have the business context that want to get something valuable out of the data, that will take an action, but unfortunately they can't write the query. So historically, there's been this game of telephone. I ask you something that I kind of need, and the really good analysts play telephone really well. They hear the question right, they reshape it right, they turn it into math right. And we thought that AI would instantly almost bridge the gap. So if I wanted to speak another language, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, whatever, I could do it fluently today through AI. But it is still not the case that people can write sort of SQL fluently, because it's the type of thing where if it's 99% right, it's not quite good. With all that being said, obviously we have a natural language to SQL writer within our platform. So it is the case that you can start your pipelines and do the basics of joins in our platform without having strong SQL knowledge. What I would warn against is that a lot of solutions that basically help you solve that last mile, that help you solve the sort of nuance of the question, those things are not quite there yet. So it is the case that AI is certainly going to become prevalent in the modern data stack. It sort of is today as well, but it's going to become a bigger and bigger piece because we don't want the data to be restricted to that very small percent of users of data. In fact, we want it to be democratized across the company. And to do so, you can't require a new technical language. You want to be able to ask questions in a natural way and have a discourse. So AI is going to get us there. Probably not there today because actually it's kind of like self-driving. The bar for being right is not like you get it right most of the time. The bar for being right is really high. Where we've had a lot of success in the AI space is we do sort of the boring part. So we do automated table descriptions and column descriptions where that doesn't have to be right 99.9% of the time to be valuable. Instead, we're just stealing really boring work from the analyst that really doesn't want to be doing it and putting it onto our product or technically onto the AI.
So you've been in YC, I believe, in 22. How has the company grown in the last 2 years? Have you met your current objectives? I also saw you raise, I believe, a couple of millions. Was it 10 or 20? What are your top objectives vs the current growth trajectory of the business this year?
Sure. So we actually did YC in summer 20, which was actually the first remote batch, which actually happened during the pandemic. My co-founder and I, who had been friends for 20 years, actually never met in person for the first year of the company, which is sort of wild just to think about sort of how time has changed. But we did graduate from YC. We raised the seed round. We then subsequently raised an A off of some traction. And the growth trajectory is sort of ambitious. I think one of the things that certainly is true is when you go sort of the venture route, you're sort of making a commitment to really swing hard and try hard. And Dan and I have been going really fast, really hard for 4 years now. And that is sort of the challenge of the venture path. The venture path is seeing an opportunity in the market, seeing an undertap, and that people will attack this market. That many people obviously have built data tools in the last 100 years, and we're another one in that line. And we thought that there was a real opportunity to essentially bundle the best parts of the modern data stack together and provide a lot of value at the SMB level, which we thought was sort of not being fully addressed. So that's an opportunity that you race after. You don't just sort of let it come to you.
Right. And the growth of the business in the last 2 years, like at what ARR you situated currently, about 500K, 1 million ARR. What are your goals this year?
Sure. We're sort of a little past that. Sort of 500 or a million is more like a Series A kind of bar, and we've sort of grown past those numbers. Have over 100 customers with sort of around a 25K ACV. So we have sort of do that sort of math, you would think that we're sort of over 2.5 in ARR, which is true. But I think kind of our growth ambitions are I think in general, if you're going the venture route, you want to be trying to grow at a double pace. So you want to try to be able to hit and what that typically means, that if you do sort of the rule of 72, that would mean that that's a 6% monthly growth. And in YC, they sort of push you to 10% sort of growth metrics. So very ambitious growth targets. And I think that that's really, if you're able to hit those, it means that, something about your product is resonating in market. But the truth is that in order to hit those numbers, you're always searching for a new channel, or you're always searching for ways to expand your existing channel that's working.
Right. How does one raise 15 million? Because it's been pretty linear. It's been like typical YC company. You've raised 125K, then 4 million in 2020 during the pandemic, and then 15 in 2022. So tell me about that trajectory, and if you have tips for us for raising capital.
Sure. So the best way to raise capital is to not need capital. So we'll go with the standard cliches. The truth is that YC did something really special for us, which is they had demo day. And it's such a trivial concept, but it's a focal point, and basically it sort of forces a decision. Did we want to raise money? Yes or no? Did we want to do it by demo day? Yes or no? And once we had made a decision, that answer happened to be yes to both of those questions, because we did want to accelerate. And Dan and John, sort of the two earliest engineers, were making $0. So we and myself too. But so we all wanted to sort of change that trajectory in our lives. But in practice, once we had answered that question as yes, we had this sort of real commitment device. And in general, the amount that you raise is not as important as can you get it done effectively and quickly, not with like a line around the door, but effective, making sure that there is real interest in your round. And the key to that, to me, was a credible commitment timeline, which is I'm going to raise X by Y, and if I don't, I'm going to go in a different direction. And I think, like, at the end of the day, investors are very good at seeing through like fluff and nonsense. And at the end of the day, I was committed to we would raise some money by demo day, or we wouldn't. And by the way, I also struck out a lot. So I will say the other secret, which is, when you look at Crunchbase, you see, oh, they raised this, and then they raised this, and then they raised this, which is sort of a very cliche story, or very vanilla story. In practice, so I remember Brian Chesky has these 6 emails of rejections for his seed round. I have hundreds. So we received hundreds of rejections on our seed, and we also received over 100 rejections for our A. So the cliche story is, oh yeah, just like no bumps in the road, and like everything looks up and to the right. In practice, it's always a challenge. And CEOs that sort of don't experience that, they're really, even to be on the right tail, you're going to experience a ton of it, and to be on the right tail, you're still going to experience a ton of it.
Love it. Yeah, that last segment was quite good. Where can people find out more about you, Fish?
Sure. Obviously, visit us at mozartdata.com, or check out my LinkedIn. I try to post a lot about data analytics and, of course, Mozart Data.